Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fellowship Church. Happy New Year. Wow, 2021. What was that? But hey, we're off to new beginnings. 2022 is here, and now it's time to make those resolutions. You know, a great practice my family and I do is to make resolutions for each other instead of ourselves. I'm kidding. Don't ever do that. But we really are praying for a great 2022 for each of you. We would love an opportunity to get to know you and to keep you informed of all that's going on here at FC. And you can help us by filling out our connection card, what we call our connection card. And you can do that right down the home page of our website. Our website's fellowshipchurchct.com. Really just fill out with whatever you're comfortable with. If you fill out all that info with an actual address, we'll be sending you a gift just for checking us out online. I want to thank all of you who have been giving here each week and those participating in our Christmas offering. We are just so appreciative. If you'd like to give, you can do so on our website or app, or you can also text to give now. You can text Fellowship CT to 833-245-6507. Well, that's it for me. I hope each of you enjoy the first service of 2022. Thank you so much for joining us at FC Online.
Lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Yes, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. Oh, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Hey, well, good morning, FC, and we are now entering into the first Sunday of 2022. I can't believe it. That has a nice sound to it, 2022. Well, Well, typically when entering into a new year, our minds tend to pendulate between two directions, the past and the future. We take a complete survey and report of all that occurred in 2021. Even many social media companies will create these rewinds or wrap-ups of the highlights of our past year. YouTube will give its top videos, Spotify will tell you your most listened to songs, Facebook and Instagram will show you memories or your top posts. Even your Photos app on your iPhone will create slideshows of your past experiences. But we also take a look at the challenges we face, the sufferings we endured, the loss we experienced, and the change we underwent. In sum, we can say that this year you faced a lot of change, or maybe you failed to change the things that you wanted to change about yourself or your circumstances. Or maybe even you yourself, you changed and you're not the same person you were the year before. We also contemplate the future. We think about the changes we want to make, the changes we need to make, hence New Year's resolutions. But also we think of the stressful and exciting things up ahead. And then maybe you're still reeling from what 2021 gave you and you're bringing that into this year. So all in all, here's the one word I'm reminded of when I think of the new year: change. The change we experienced the past year, and the changes I hope that are going to happen this year, and the change I want and need to make, but also the uncertainty, the unknown changes this new year will bring. And one of the things we often experience with change is fear. And fear can stop us from making the changes we want and also frees us in the process of adapting the change. In fact, sometimes we don't even have to experience anything in real life to get our fear going. We can simply imagine a change going wrong and it's enough to shut us down. Like the fear of failure, even the idea of not being successful, letting someone else down, not being able to complete what we want to complete or make the change we want to make, that can shut us down from adapting the change or facing new change. Fear of the unknown. There's uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future, which makes the present tough to handle and makes us feel vulnerable or insecure, just facing the possibility of disappointment or being rejected. Furthermore, if I wanted to make a change and the only person who knew whether I succeeded or failed was me, that's one thing. But as soon as other people are involved and we're responsible for others, it feels different. It's really less of a fear of the unknown and more of a fear of rejection. So the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, I get it all. And all that fear can make us want to avoid any sort of change at all costs, pushing us to want to quit, hide, or play it safe. But what if, even if everything never stopped changing around us, there was a way to not get knocked off by the course of fear? People have been struggling with how to handle change forever. And when you open the pages of the Bible and read from the writers that God used to tell his story, you'll see that they too struggled with the idea of change. They went through a lot of the same stuff we go through: loss, broken relationships, heartbreak, uncertainty, insecurity, and so much more. And many of them wrestled with the question of how they could trust God when their lives seemed to be a constant series of unwanted and unexpected changes. The story we're looking at today is in the Old Testament, and the story takes place after God had sent Moses to lead the Israelites, God's people, out of slavery to Egypt. So through Moses, God not only set his people free from slavery, but he was committed to lead them to an incredible land of their own, which was called the Promised Land. So to kind of fast forward the story here, the 10 plagues happen in Egypt. Pharaoh lets the Israelites go. They cross the Red Sea. Each and every day, God was providing food for them, manna, and providing protection for them as well. And it took them 40 years, 40 long years of traveling to finally get to the Promised Land, this land that God has committed and promised to them. Finally, landing on the outskirts of the Promised Land, upon arriving, they wanted to check it out before moving in. And after all they've been through in Egypt, could you blame them? They wanted to survey the land, draw up a report what they had to face in the future. So they sent 12 spies into the land that they were hoping to make their own, to see what the Promised Land was like. And here's the report that we can find in Numbers chapter 13. This was their report to Moses. "We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here's the kind of fruit it produces." All right, so they survey the land. They go in there and they see it's exactly kind of like how it's promised. It's a fertile land, a beautiful land that's ready to be harvested, that they could live out the rest of their generations in for years and years to come. They even bring back some of the fruit, saying, here's the kind of fruit that this land produces. It's amazing, unlike anything we've ever seen. But here's the caveat here in verse 28. But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. So really, they now are up against some really tough stuff. They take a look at the land and like, man, the people here, they're strong. They have all these strongholds and fortifications. We even saw giants there that we're going to have to face if we decide to enter into this land. Now, when you hear a report like this survey and report can sound similar to the reports that we make about our lives, both past, present, and future. Sometimes you and I, when it comes to the changes we need to make in our lives for the better, we face giants too. We face strongholds as well. And we make surveys, we drop reports of the past year and the future. And often we see all the giants that we'll have to face when we need to make a change in the future. Often in the form of fear, like we talked about. The fear of failure, rejection, and the unknown are all kinds of giants. And it's not easy to make a change, or to get out of a toxic relationship, or to try to confront an addiction, or to break a bad habit, or make a positive move we know we need to do, or to ask for help, or to get help like counseling and therapy. And often, with all those giants that you may face, we often respond like these spies did. We say, I can't do it. It's too difficult. It's scary. The giant of fear is too big. So even if we genuinely want what's on the other side of change, we stay exactly where we are, frozen. But here's the thing. If we decide to do that and not take a step into the promised land, we have no idea what we can miss if we allow our fears to be greater than our attempt to change for the better. If we let our fears control us, they have the ability to cause us to miss out on some really good things in life. The things that God wants for our lives, the positive change that we can make in our lives and in other people's lives as well. See, the goal behind fear in these moments is for us to kind of miss out on God's best for us. And that's the last thing that God wants for us in our lives. Fortunately, not all the spies came back with the same report. Two of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a completely different view than the other spies. And here's what they said, found in chapter 14 of the book of Numbers. Two of the men who had explored the land, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, tore their clothing. This is a sign of distress. They can't believe what they're hearing about the people fearful entering the land. Verse 7, it says, they said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into the land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. Everyone said they couldn't take the promised land except for these two spies, Joshua and Caleb. Why was their response so different? Because their fear didn't get the last word. They knew their fear was not the end of the story, and they saw God as part of the story, and that he had gotten them this far. He's freed them from slavery. He's provided manna for them and food all along the way, and they're finally at this land that God promised them. And even if they were afraid, they knew that God would meet them on the other side of the fear. So what made their report different? They included and remembered God and his promises. Does it mean that they weren't scared? No, they probably were, but here's the thing about trusting God. It's not about not being scared. It's about following him, even though you may still be scared about what you have to face and the changes you need to make. See, courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is moving forward in spite of the fear. And you may have heard it said by Nelson Mandela like it's been said by many others. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Here's what I know today, that there are two types of people who are here. There are those that are about to and deciding whether or not to enter the promised land, to face the change, or the need to make a change. And then there are those who are facing giants right now, those who are trying to tear down strongholds as well in your life. Or maybe you're facing both. You're dealing with giants and strongholds, but you're also in the midst of having to make an important change or an important decision. And I want to talk about a couple applications we can draw from this story. The first is this: include God in your report. See, in the midst of the fear of failure and the fear of rejection and the fear of the unknown, Joshua and Caleb, when they made a survey of the land, they included God in their report. And we got to do the same when we drop our reports of what we look towards in the past and what we're looking towards in the future, to include God in. I want to read a verse from the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 8. It says this, that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Well, what does that mean? That means that God doesn't change even if everything around us does. It means when everything around us feels unstable, Jesus isn't. With everything around us feels inconsistent, Jesus is consistent. When everything around us seems so different or like nobody can understand what I'm going through, Jesus does. When we are rooted in God and we experience a change, it does not mean that all of a sudden we're going to be happy and that every difficult circumstance change brings that it's going to be easy, but instead we know the truth that God loves us no matter what. We can know that God's love and purpose and presence doesn't change and that he can use every change, even the bad, for good because he's always faithful. It reminds me of this technique when it comes to dancing and ballet, which is called spotting. Now, this technique that dancers use is what they will do when they have to do multiple twirls and spins is that they will pick a specific point on a wall to really focus on. So when they're going through the progressions of spins and cycles, they can remain stable. They can remain not dizzy and not falling over because of this technique called spotting. And that's what I think of when I think of the fact that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. That he's the one that we look to for stability so that we don't fall over when everything else around us is spinning. So what else does that mean? That means even if things are unpredictable or out of your control, God's ability to hold the whole world never changes. Even if things will never be the same because of a death and a loss or a permanent injury or a chronic health issue, God's ability to hear your prayers never change. Even if what lies ahead because of a fear of rejection, the amount of God's love for you never changes. Even if what lies ahead is new territory and an unknown, God promises to be with you through it all. That never changes. Even if what lies ahead is a fear of failure, Jesus says that when we are weak, we are strong through him. God's reliability to steady you never changes. So the next time you experience a change in your life, and you certainly will, you don't have to be uprooted by insecurity, fear, or frustration. Instead, you can remain steady and stable and staying rooted in an unchanging God. See, many times where we put a period on our story, thinking it's the end, thinking it's over, thinking that nothing can good come from it, God puts a comma. The story isn't over. This all reminds me of a woman of faith named Corrie ten Boom, where her and her family were Christians during the Nazi occupation in the Netherlands. And they chose to act on their faith by actively participating in the Dutch underground through hiding, feeding, and the transportation of the Jewish people. And eventually she was betrayed and she was discovered for what her family was doing in this underground system. And the Ten Boom family members were separated and transferred to concentration camps. And basically, she was the only one that survived out of her family from those concentration camps. She wrote many biographies and memoirs of her experiences. And in one of them, she says this, "Today, I know that such memories are the key not to the past, but to the future. I know that the experiences of our lives, when you let God use them, become the mysterious and perfect preparation for the work he will give us to do. This is what the past is for. Every experience God gives us, every person he puts in our lives, is the perfect preparation for the future that only he can see. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." What an inspiring story she has. Every experience we have is a mysterious and perfect preparation for the work he will give us to do. What a challenging perspective after thinking about all that she endured to have such a strong faith like that, to know it was all for God's purposes. Maybe everything you faced and experienced was to prepare you for taking that first step into the promised land. Don't look to the past trying to forget. In your report, look for the moments where you saw God work, where he made himself known. This is what Joshua and Caleb knew. They knew they could trust their unknown future to a known God because they remembered what he did for them in the past. And that brings us to our second application out of the story for today. And number 2 is to remember. The act, or I would prefer to say the discipline of remembrance, is so important. See, the sad part about this story is that the people of Israel decided to listen to the 10 spies instead of Joshua and Caleb. They made a decision to let their fear have the last say. They totally and entirely forgot all that God has done for them, how he has freed them from slavery, how he has provided for them manna and has destined them for this promised land. They completely forgot about God. And for that, everyone who decided and sort of made a vote not to enter the promised land, they would not get to experience the promised land. They would not get to experience all the good that came from it. And the next generation would be the generation to go into the promised land. And they wandered the wilderness for 40 years without any home. So here's what I know. If you forget, you're going to continue to wander lost. So when you look back to the past, if God was faithful or committed to you in that circumstance or season of your life before, then you can stay rooted in the belief that he will be faithful again after. Well, eventually, fast forwarding, Joshua would be the one to lead the Israelites into the promised land, and they would cross the Jordan River. And after they crossed the Jordan River, they would stack 12 stones. And these 12 stones were representing the 12 tribes of Israel, but it was to serve as a sign and a call to remembrance for all generations for the people of Israel. That when they looked upon this memorial, it would cause the people to remember the Lord's goodness when he led them into the promised land. So when you draw up your report, when you look to the past of all that you experienced maybe this past year, all the change that you endured, don't forget it. Remember it and look to God's goodness and how he's brought you through it. And when you do that, you'll know that he can bring you through whatever you have to face next. Here's what I want you to do today, is I want you to identify one change you'd like to make. And maybe as you listen today, there was something already that came to mind. Is there something new that you want to try or learn? Is there a relationship that's not good for you that you need to step away from for a little while? Is there a relationship that needs to be improved? Like you could take some steps to do that for your marriage or for your parenting or for your parents if you're a student in here or a child listening. Is there a habit in your life that needs to be replaced with something healthier? Is there a person to forgive? Is there something you need to give over to God? So identify the one change you want to make. When you're drawing up that report for this new year, 2022, what is one area that you want to change? And not only that, I want you to identify the fear that surfaced as you thought of it. This is a thing that makes you want to pause and think, I'm not sure I can do that. Maybe it is the fear of the rejection or failure or the unknown. Maybe it's the fear of actually changing. Maybe it's the fear of the work that you'd have to put in to make that change and how hard that would be. Whatever it is, this is your giant, and pay attention to that giant. And then invite God in. Invite God in on your report. This is your chance to introduce your fear to God. This is your chance to have your Joshua and Caleb moment, to remember that God is bigger than your fear. You could do something as simple as praying to God and sharing with him the change you want to make and the fear that is keeping you stuck. Let sharing your fear be the first step in choosing a different response to that fear. Imagine if you and I could live with that type of trust. What if we knew that no matter what we face, we knew that God was bigger, that we can trust our unknown future to a known God? And if that trusting God helped us to make a positive change in our lives, how much more confidence would it give us to make the next change we need to make? When we live with the confidence of who God is, even if we're afraid, we can have courage.